My name is Ken Tassif, and I'm the Compliance Program Manager for the San Luis Obispo County Health Agency. This training is intended to address the agency's obligation to train on topics related to laws and regulations governing healthcare services in the public sector. Today's training is on the prevention, detection, and correction of waste, fraud, and abuse. But as you go through the training today, I'd like to ask you to think about how the concepts you learn apply to the trust our clients and the public place in us as we provide a broad array of services. As employees of a public healthcare provider, we're entrusted not only with the healthcare of some of our most vulnerable citizens, but also with the resources that give us the means to provide that healthcare. By resources, I mean money, and every one of us has an impact on how those resources are used. For the vast majority of us, we take great pride in contributing to a very efficient and cost-effective system of healthcare delivery. Unfortunately, there are a few individuals or companies out there that choose to either cheat the system or to act wastefully, which ultimately takes resources away from our clients who most need the help. Our contract with the Department of Healthcare Services requires us to train on topics related to compliance with laws and regulations. Primary among these is the topic of fraud, waste, and abuse prevention. That is the focus of the training today. For brevity, I'll refer to fraud, waste, and abuse as FWA. You can access the FWA policy through the intranet if you're a county employee by clicking on Policies on the Health Agency homepage, then clicking on Compliance once you get to the policy page. Contractors and network providers can access the policy by clicking on the Partner Support icon at the bottom of the health agency's internet homepage. The objectives of this training are to understand what FWA is and why it's important. I'll explain to you what the Centers for Medicare Services expects from healthcare employees and what the county expects from you as well. I'll explain how you can prevent and detect FWA, and lastly, I'll expect how to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse. So let's start with an explanation of what FWA is. Fraud, waste, and abuse in healthcare programs is one of the most expensive inefficiencies in government services. It accounts for hundreds of millions of dollars of stolen or wasted funding each year, and that affects everyone, including you. Most importantly, when we lose these resources, they're no longer available to help those who need them most. Fraud is the intentional submission of false information to the government or a government contractor in an effort to get money or a benefit. An example of this is when a practitioner bills for a service that they never performed for a client. Waste and abuse have different definitions. However, generally they relate to requesting a payment for services that doesn't meet the standard for payment or reimbursement. An example of this would be when a practitioner takes longer than medically necessary to treat a client or treats a client more often than medically necessary. These are brief definitions of fraud, waste, and abuse, but the full government definition is shown in the health agency's FWA policy. The primary differences between fraud, waste, and abuse have to do with intent and knowledge. Fraud generally requires that a reasonable person would understand that the action is wrong or illegal. Waste and abuse are illegal as well. However, they don't require intent or knowledge that we're doing something wrong. While fraud is clearly the worst of the three, there are penalties for any of these three violations. There are dozens of laws that govern the prevention of fraud, waste, and abuse, but the main four that affect the health agency are the False Claims Act, the Anti-Kickback Statute, the Stark Law, and HIPAA. Primary among these is the False Claim Act. The False Claims Act is fairly short and concise, essentially stating that it's illegal for anyone to knowingly present a false record or fraudulent claim or conspires with someone else to do so. The Anti-Kickback Statute states that it's illegal to offer or receive anything of value in an effort to induce or reward the referral of federal health care program business. This essentially means that you can't take money outside of your regular county pay for referral of health care services. The Stark Law prohibits making a referral to any healthcare service or product in which the person making the referral has an ownership interest or has a relationship with someone with an ownership interest. And lastly, HIPAA may not seem related to FWA, but remember that protected health information is even more valuable than personal financial information. Protecting our clients' health information is an integral part of preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. A bit more about the False Claims Act. Again, it's probably the primary law related to prevention of FWA. It clearly articulates that it's illegal for anyone to knowingly present a false record or fraudulent claim or to conspire with someone else to do so. Violations of the False Claim Act can result in significant civil penalties and virtually always have the result of exclusion from participation in federally or state-funded healthcare programs. The anti-kickback statute states that it's illegal to offer or receive anything of value in an effort to induce or reward the referral of federal healthcare program business. This essentially means that you can't take money outside of your regular county pay for referral of healthcare services. The Stark Law prohibits making a referral to any health service or product in which the person making the referral has an ownership interest or has a relationship with someone with an ownership interest. Violations of these laws not only include high civil penalties, but also include possible imprisonment. We've discussed HIPAA at length in other trainings. However, it's important to know that protection of client information is one of the areas of FWA prevention where you can have the greatest impact. Sometimes the policies we put into place to protect this information may impact productivity or your ability to communicate, but there are well-documented reasons that those safeguards are in place. Criminal enterprises regularly try to enter our system by exploiting employees who are not following safe computing practices. Don't be the person who let the bad guy into our systems. Earlier, I mentioned exclusion from federal and state healthcare programs. Individuals and organizations who violate the law are generally placed on the list of excluded individuals and entities, or the LEIE. Any person on this list is precluded from participating in any program that receives federal or state healthcare dollars. The law requires that we check every employee against this list prior to hiring and every single month thereafter to ensure nobody working for us is on that list. So why is FWA training so important? First and foremost, we want to give employees the information they need to keep from breaking the law. Knowing the rules is the first step in any compliance program. Another reason is that FWA saps hundreds of millions of dollars from the healthcare system every year. This results in fewer treatment resources for our clients. By knowing the rules, you can be one of the best weapons in combating fraud, waste, and abuse. What does the Center for Medicare Services expect and require from the county? Well, think back to your compliance program training. CMS requires that we have an effective compliance program that includes policies related to healthcare issues, including fraud, waste, and abuse. Remember that an effective compliance program has 7 elements that include policies, training of staff, appointment of a compliance officer, communication with staff about compliance topics, auditing and monitoring, programs to prevent future violations, and a well-publicized disciplinary program. In support of the compliance program, the health agency has established a waste, fraud, and abuse policy. This training is intended to let you know about the WFA prevention program. We also do regular auditing of charts and billing, and when we do find a problem, we have a program to correct it and prevent it from happening in the future. What the Center for Medicare Services expect from staff is pretty straightforward. First, they expect staff to complete this training and understand the elements of FWA. Next, they expect our staff to comply with the health agency's code of conduct. They want you to understand the potential penalties and discipline associated with violating the law or this policy. And lastly, they expect employees to report any suspected or known FWA. And what does the health agency expect? Well, we expect our employees to understand the law and our policy related to billing and other fiscal activities. And we expect our employees to comply with those laws and policies. We expect documentation and coding to be timely and accurate, and we expect employees to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse. So how can you combat FWA? The most important thing you can do is to understand the law and our policies. You can also help by ensuring that documentation is accurate and timely. Remember that memory fades quickly, and documentation done in arrears can only be less accurate. Other things you can do is to always verify information provided to you. If you aren't certain of your source, double check. And being aware of suspicious activity can be very helpful. Regularly, fraud, waste, and abuse is detected not by an audit, but instead by the sharp and ethical eye of staff. And how can you recognize signs of FWA? Well, some indicators may be when a client's medical history doesn't support the services being billed, or when a provider appears to be performing services that are unnecessary or overstated. Another indicator may be a prescription that looks altered or forged, and occasionally an indicator may be when a provider is consistently late with documentation or billing. Remember that your awareness and common sense are often your best prevention tools. We've discussed reporting numerous times in training, but I can't emphasize enough that it's everyone's responsibility to report violations or suspected violations, even if you are the one who committed the violation. We understand you may not have intended the violation, but it's important for the health agency to know about a violation so that we can correct it and put measures in place so it doesn't happen again. I also want every employee to be assured that you are protected from retaliation if you report suspected FWA, and remind you that retaliation against anyone who may report a suspected violation on your part is strictly prohibited. If you know of or suspect fraud, waste, or abuse, you can report it in a variety of ways. You can report to your supervisor or anywhere in your chain of supervision. You can also contact me, Ken Tassif, the Health Agency Compliance Officer, at extension 4788 or by email. You can call the toll-free anonymous hotline at area code 855-326-9623, or you can contact the Federal Office of Inspector General at oig.hhs.gov. The health agency investigates all reports of fraud, waste, and abuse. If you're notified that you'll be asked questions about an issue, either as the subject of the inquiry or as a witness, you must be aware of two absolutes. First, you must be honest and forthright. And second, you must not alter or destroy any documents or other evidence. The goal of any investigation is to ascertain the truth, and by following these two absolutes, we can take steps to correct any violations and prevent them from reoccurring. So to wrap things up, prevention, detection, and correction of fraud, waste, and abuse is the cornerstone of the health agency's compliance program. Staff is expected to comply with these statutes, regulations, and policies related to billing or other activities that may have financial impact. We expect employees to report known or suspected FWA, and violations of FWA-related policies can result in discipline by the county and action by the state and federal government. Together, we can help ensure our healthcare dollars go to the right place, the clients we serve. When this slide closes, you'll be able to take a final exam which will ask one question, affirming that you completed this training and that you'll comply with the health agency's fraud, waste, and abuse prevention policy. Please click the Start button next to the final exam and follow the instructions. If you have any questions about the contents of the training or navigating this program, please speak with your supervisor, or you can call Ken Tassif, the Health Agency's Compliance Officer, at area code 805-781-4788. Thank you for your commitment to compliance with the law and commitment to ethical conduct at work.